But anyway, welcome to you. I want to introduce the main faces that you'll see in here. Joanne Zimmerman is an associate professor at Texas State University, a co-chair of the Leisure Management SIG, and a director of Texas State's World Leisure Center of Excellence. Antonio Bramante is a member of the World Leisure Board and an active collaborator with Joanne and me as we organize the Leisure Management Special Interest Group's activities. Our special guests today are Destiny Hisaw, Ethan Jordan, and Sophia Kniseley from Texas State University's World Leisure Center of Excellence. I'll provide a proper introduction in a minute. I'm John Tower, co-chair of the Leisure Management Special Interest Group and honorary fellow at Victoria University in Melbourne. Before we get started, it's custom in Australia to pay respect to the traditional owners of the land. I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where I am. I'm on Wurundjeri land in the Kulin Nation. I value the culture, relationships to country, kinship connections, and journeys of the first peoples of this land. I pay respect to the traditional elders, past, present, and emerging. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. I also pay respect to the traditional owners of the lands where you may be. I'm pleased to share that we have over 50 registrations from around the world, including the USA, Canada, Australia, India, Brazil, South Africa, and Thailand. I think we've covered all the continents. I also recognize many Leisure Management SIG members are in time zones that hinder their attendance, but they'll view the video of the webinar in the future. We have the chat function for anyone to share your comments or questions. Perhaps just use the chat function as we're getting started to provide a short introduction of yourself so everyone knows who's participating. Joanne and Bramante will monitor the chat. The format for today's session is around 25-minute conversation with our guests, followed by your comments and questions via the chat. So let me properly introduce Destiny, Ethan, and Sophia to the webinar. This is the first time that the Leisure Management Special Interest Group has collaborated with the World Leisure Center of Excellence. This is something we'd be willing to do with others from the World Leisure family. So let me start with Destiny. She is a senior in the Recreation and Sport Management major at Texas State. Now, for those that aren't familiar with those American terms, seniors means that she's in her 4th year. She loves canoeing and surfing, basically anything water related, really, and the ocean is her happy place. Our second guest is Ethan Jordan. Ethan is a sophomore in the recreation sport major. That means he's in his 2nd year. He has a martial arts black belt and has been practicing martial arts for over 15 years. Our third guest is Sophia Kniseley. Sophia is a sophomore in the exercise, sports science, and health and fitness management major. She played soccer for 15 years and likes to go to strength and conditioning gyms and enjoys watching all kinds of sports. So our webinar today is, the aim of the webinar is to explore American student perceptions of the differences in the types of recreation and sport facilities in Melbourne, Australia, and their own experience in the United States. Let's set the scene by inviting our guests to comment about their overall impression of the provision of sport and recreation facilities in Melbourne. I should mention they're all in Melbourne at the moment. They're part of a study abroad program from Texas State University, and they're based at La Trobe University here in Melbourne, and I think they're in their 3rd week. So Destiny, let's hear from you. What is your impression of what's going on here in Melbourne? We can't hear you, Destiny. Maybe check your microphone, because I can see you're not muted. Okay. All right, well, you play with the technical side of things, and maybe someone can go and help Destiny, Joanne, maybe you can go and check that out. Ethan, let's move over to you. What's your impression of what you've seen while you've been in Melbourne?
So I've been practicing martial arts for 15 years, and martial arts are significantly more prevalent in Melbourne than in Texas, from what I've seen. It was very difficult for me to go anywhere in the city and not see a number of schools along my route. In Texas, there was not nearly as many schools. There was maybe one per, it's called 50-mile radius. Um, with that said, though, there seems to be a very select few disciplines in Melbourne, namely Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and karate. Not a whole lot of variety among the different disciplines.
Okay. All right. And I wonder, and you may not know this, but Melbourne is a particularly multicultural place. Do you think the multicultural aspects of things um, is the reason why you see a lot more of it because it's more of an international pursuit?
I do think that, yeah. I think because there's some people from this country and this country and this country and that country, they're all sort of conglomerating into various schools around here. But they all want to teach their own discipline, not whatever everyone else is doing.
And I guess that Texas isn't quite as multicultural.
Not in my area of Texas, nothing else.
All right. That's great. Okay, well, let's shift over to you, Sophia. What's your impression of what you've seen while you've been here in Melbourne?
For first impressions, it's very unique. A lot of the things that we've seen here, um, kind of surprised me because when you look every corner, there's something available for each of our specific options. Like here at the hotel at Quest, right outside, there's two strength and conditioning gyms right next door. You can go down the street to Kohl's, and inside that little shopping center is a another fitness center. And it's really interesting how similar but different they all are. So that was my first impression of what I've seen.
Okay, that's good. And Destiny, have we got you able to speak to us yet?
Yes, I believe so.
Yay! So what's your first impression of
Alrighty.
what you've seen?
Okay, so sorry about that. So truly, I think that Melbourne does sporting really well. I've only been in the city for a couple of weeks now, and nowhere else have I found it to be so accessible, particularly to be a spectator. Whether it's rugby, footy, tennis, or even ice hockey, there's always a game to catch on the weekends or a match being replayed on the television. And compared to my experience with major sporting events back in the United States, these are relatively inexpensive. And in addition to this, the city has really great infrastructure in place that makes getting to sports and recreation facilities fairly easy. Also, public transportation not only provides a way to get to sport facilities, but also an opportunity to meet other fans who share a common interest. And seeing others wearing the same team merch or even barracking for the other team invites conversation and really adds to this sense of community. And through our tours of various facilities, it also became clear that accessibility and universal design are major strengths of the city. Australia truly does make it easy to go out and immerse oneself in the world of sport and recreation.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we're going to stick with you now because you've been
Okay.
looking at aquatic facilities, and I want to find out why did you choose that? Obviously, you said water is your happy place, but what are some of the key differences and similarities between American and Australian facilities?
Yeah, so well, I chose aquatic facilities because I have a deep love for the water, and I really believe that everyone should have access to a place where they can go and experience what I see to be one of the great joys of life, aquatics. So just like to set the stage, aquatic facilities can be further divided on a variety of factors based on what type of water recreation activities and facilities they offer. They can be competition facilities that have lap pools and diving wells. Recreation facilities may offer slides, wave pools, play areas. A health and fitness facility might offer equipment such as flumes or water treadmills. And facilities can also offer training, certifications, activity classes, and if you're so inclined, elite performance training. So there's really a lot of opportunity to do a lot of things. Um, it can be a high risk environment, so they have to be planned and operated properly. Of course, there's drowning, water related injuries, but those can all be mitigated by ensuring that lifeguards are placed along the facility in areas that give them clear sight lines across pools. And proper signage can help as well, both for safety and consistent operation, not only for patrons, but also for staff and emergency personnel. Another way that we can increase safety is that we can have CCTV systems in place or controlled access zones, especially areas that may be used to store chemicals used in sanitation and water treatment processes. There also may be regulatory agencies that can help the design team and operators ensure both safety and accessibility within a facility. And these are all factors that tend to cross those international lines. You'll see them in aquatic facilities, whether in the United States or in Melbourne. And I actually had the opportunity to study 4 aquatic facilities, 2 of which were in Australia and 1 in the United States. In the States, I visited the city of Kyle splash pad and the James Atkins pool, both of which are city-run or owned outdoor facilities. And in Australia, I toured Watermark Banual and Mill Park Leisure Center. And both of those are indoor aquatic facilities that are owned by the city but managed by the private company Belgravia Leisure. One major difference between the States and Australia is this idea of accessibility and universal design. And I know we're going to touch on it later, but it's really just a big thing. While the facilities in the States met ADA accessibility requirements, they did not have as many innovative features as the Australian facilities did. Both J. Madkins Pool and the City of Kyle Splash Pad were also older facilities and were beginning to show signs of wear and tear in the facility. Some may say that they were in need of an update, but they truly were a family-friendly environment. While Watermark and Mill Park Leisure felt less accessible for families, they had an impressive safety measure in place that involved colored wristbands based on a child's age and alerting parents that they need to supervise their own children. And this system, while very secure, could also create doubt in a parent's mind that a facility will do their part in monitoring children as well. So truly planning aquatic facilities requires a balance for both patrons and staff. And it's interesting to see how those measures cross international boundaries.
Okay, fantastic. Great insights. Let's move on to Ethan, your turn now. And sorry I didn't get your slide up sooner, Destiny, but we're on track now. So Ethan, you looked at martial arts. Obviously, it's something you've pursued for 15 years. So let's zero in on what are some of the key differences and similarities. And you already mentioned a couple, but let's go over it again, please.
I'd say excuse me. The biggest difference between schools in Australia versus America is the number of schools to choose from. Again, in America, I've been training at the same school for 15 years, partially because it's the only school in a pretty big radius of where I lived. And I never saw another option in that entire time. While I've been in Australia, you can't go more than 2 blocks without seeing at least one school in the area. Um, there's not many similarities between any 2 schools, even amongst the same country, because every school is run differently based on the discipline and the school owner in question. But the biggest similarity between schools globally really is the structures and how various classes are run. All schools generally have your advanced class and your beginner class, and sometimes the intermediate class, further divided into advanced adults, advanced juniors, beginner adults, beginner juniors, intermediate adults, intermediate juniors, and so on. And they almost all had the first part of class was either bowing into the school or warming up, and then you had some time for practicing one skill, another time for practicing another skill, and then concluding the class bowing out of the school and whatnot.
Okay, so I'm curious as to again the differences because I haven't done martial arts since the 1970s, so I've sort of lost touch with it. But I was wondering, because Destiny looked at places like Watermark, which is a major facility here, and they likely offered maybe some classes within a major center like that that would offer a martial arts class, just as they might offer gymnastics or exercise type things and whatnot. Do you have the same sort of thing in Texas where you could do martial arts at some of the community leisure facilities and things like that?
I have only seen a singular martial art club specific to Texas State campus where we used some generic dance hall, I think it was, but I haven't actually seen any martial arts type facilities or offering school offerings in other facilities, like a general gym, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be interesting to know if in fact, because you seem to suggest there's a lot that's going on here in Melbourne with martial arts venues and things, what the participation rates are in the two countries. But we'll save that for another time and explore that. All right. Well, thank you, Ethan. Let's move on to Sophia. You've investigated strength and cardio fitness training centers. Tell us why you chose those particular places and what are some of the similarities and differences, please.
So I chose strength and cardiovascular training facilities just because that is what I'm more used to. And these spaces were designed to enhance both muscular strength and heart health for users at any fitness level. These fitness facilities combine resistant machines, free weights, and cardio equipment like treadmills and rowing machines with a dual focus on endurance and everyday wellness. Some main considerations include safety protocols, sustainability, and inclusive design. Effective operations require emergency procedures, secure access, ADA compliance, proper supervision, and regular equipment maintenance. Facility design must accommodate diverse equipment while ensuring adequate lighting, ventilation, and storage, all in line with safety codes. Sustainability is increasingly prioritized with strategies like energy efficient systems, water conservation, and collaborative eco-conscious design practices. Ancillary spaces such as locker rooms and storage areas also demand regular upkeep and organization at these locations. The facilities I compared were Aldo's Gym in the US with accessibility limitations due to retrofitting, and Watermark and Will Park Leisure in Australia, which exemplify universal design and accessibility. These facilities represent the diversity in how different countries design and operate buildings, and how they also vary in how inclusive their fitness environments are.
Okay, and you've looked at Watermark, and I've seen you've got Aldo's Gym in the U.S. in Texas. Could you just comment a little bit about the breadth? Do they have the same level of equipment, the nature of activities? I know that I haven't been again in a fitness center for a few years in terms of that, but do they have more diversity? Or are they similar about the breadth and depth of what they provide in terms of strength and conditioning and fitness?
They are very similar, but Watermark had a lot more options than Aldo's Gym, like more equipment that could do uh, some similar exercises, but just in different ways. Whereas Aldo's was very constricted and narrow on what you could do, and had to follow more of like a plan.
Okay. All right. So let's move on. I know that a lot of this has been focused on, you're here doing a course on cross-cultural analysis. Let's talk a little bit about some of the features you've looked at, and I'll stick with you, Sophia. What would be some of the differences about the amenities that are offered, and maybe explain what you mean by amenities when you're sort of talking about these two places?
So for amenities, I would consider that anything extra that the facility offers. The two places that were Aldo's Gym in the US and Watermark, as well as Mill Park Leisure. And comparing them, I noticed that Aldo's Gym, it was much smaller than the ones here, and they did not offer as much. And so they only had large family-sized bathrooms and showers. And that was the only extra amenities that they offered their clients, which they were pleased with, and so that worked for them. As for Watermark and Mill Park Leisure, they had lockers, express lockers, a cafe, and more accessibility features like lifts to get around. And so it was a lot more inclusive and maybe made it more comfortable for the people to be there.
Okay. And Destiny, let's bring you in. What did you find about the fee structure? How much people have to pay to use some of these types of venues that you explored?
Yeah, so it can really differ based off of a variety of factors. For the ones that I visited in the United States, it was a public facility, so publicly funded based off of taxes. So the prices were a little cheaper. And they also did not offer a ton of extra amenities. So you would pay an admission fee based on your age. Um, so like children paid about $2, while adults would pay 4 or 6, and then there were group prices if you want to do a party. And that was pretty much all of these that they had. While the facilities that I visited in Australia were were city owned but managed by private companies. So they did have different structures, and they were based on a variety of factors. There was the swimming school. You could rent lap lanes to use. There were classes and activities offered, such as aqua aerobics or even immersion therapy. And each of these things had a different price. So you could pay for a day pass, or if you were a member, you could pay different prices based on how many times a week you use the facility or how oh, like which activities you wanted to do. So it was a bit on the pricier side, and you definitely would want to be a member who uses regularly to get the most out of your money. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other thing that might be worth taking note of is that in Australia, the median wage in Australia is around high 70s, low 80,000 a year. So people's capacity to pay is different, but still, if you're financially disadvantaged, a lot of the public facilities in Australia, even though they're publicly owned, they're relatively inaccessible for, if you're not financially well off. But that's, part of the challenge here. But a lot of these centers to have cafes and things like that because they want to break even. They want to make a little bit of extra money. Okay, well, let's move on to you, Ethan. Well, let's talk about the target markets in terms of who do you think, did you see much in regard to promotion or any of those sorts of things for the centers and the two different settings?
The school I researched in the United States was very much, or it seems to be a family martial arts center where you've got one student's tuition is $100 a month, 100 United States dollars, whereas for a family of five, you can cut it down to $20 per person for the same number of the same cost per month. Um, Whereas in Melbourne, it seemed to not be quite as much focus on the family side of things, more for personal self-defense and for physical conditioning.
Okay. So do you think that is that a market that Australia is missing in terms of the family market, or do you think it's just the nature of the type of people interested in martial arts?
I think it's both specifically who is interested in martial arts, and from what I've heard, you in Australia live a very work-focused life where it's get up, go to work, get back, and crash. You don't really have time to train in martial arts in the first place, from what I've heard.
Okay. Yep, and in fact, if you look at the lifestyle things, one of the places that actually has more of that feature would be in USA, but Australia is a close second. So our we share a lot of similar things, and we'll talk a little bit about those differences further on. Now, I know that you've all mentioned accessibility and inclusion, but I just want to focus in on that a little bit. So let's stick with you, Ethan, in terms of how do you think what are some of the particular features that you've seen about accessibility and inclusion at the two venues that you've explored?
Martial arts is inherently not a very physically accommodating activity. If you're wheelchair bound, you can't get up and kick, for example, right? So generally speaking, the accessibility that comes with martial arts is more focused on the spectator side of things. Can you enter the facility and observe other students and maybe a family member training themselves? The school in the United States was amazing at this. They had a massive open parking lot two double doors into the main entrance lobby and a plenty big enough lobby area to watch the martial art training floor. The schools here in Melbourne were much smaller with much smaller lobbies and spectator areas. One of the schools in Melbourne, I couldn't see a wheelchair fitting very realistically in the first place with more than about four other people in that lobby watching.
Okay. All right. And Sophia, what were your insights about the accessibility and inclusion?
So when I compared the two gyms, starting with Aldo's gym, one of the main issues is that accessibility there was very limited. The only accessible areas are the main entrance to the building and the bathroom. While these were fundamental features, they don't go very far in supporting full participation for people with disabilities. Without accessible pathways throughout the gym, modified equipment, or adequate space to move around machines, individuals using mobility aids may find it very difficult to engage in regular workouts. This lack of consideration creates a barrier not just physically, but socially as well, by excluding people from equal access to health and wellness. On the other hand, Watermark and Mill Park Leisure have taken more steps toward inclusive design. One positive feature is the accessible gate at the entrance. However, it still requires staff to unlock it, which can limit independence and create unnecessary friction for users. But that said, they've gone further than just accessible entry. The facilities are designed with wide walkways and clear spaces along walls and around equipment, making it much easier for people who use wheelchairs or other mobility aids to navigate safely and comfortably. These centers also offer accessible equipment, including lifts and machines that are designed for wheelchair users. This not only meets basic accessibility standards, it actively promotes inclusion by ensuring everyone has the opportunity to engage in physical activity on their own terms. And in summary, while Aldo's Gym shows that minimal compliance isn't enough, Watermark and Mills Park Leisure demonstrate how thoughtful design and intentional planning can lead to more inclusive environments for all users.
Okay, thank you. And Destiny, let's talk about access to water spaces. What were some of the accessibility and inclusion similarities or differences that you saw?
Yeah, so let's start with back home in the States. I visited J. Mackin's pool in the city of Kyle Splash Pad, and I'm kind of referring to them colloquially because they share the same parking lot, they're in the same area. So each of those facilities definitely complies really well with the Americans with Disability Act, the ADA requirements. And this came through with stuff like accessible parking spots right near the pool entrances. There were 2 chair lifts and 1 zero-depth pool entry, as well as wide paths in the parking lot and on the splash pad for mobility devices that really allowed for full participation in all activities, as well as accessible bathrooms with handicap stalls that had grip bars, and they were quite large as well as larger changing rooms. Signage also had braille, and there was brightly colored paint in the pools, which is great if anybody has like eyesight issues. It can help them signify which lane they're in. They did have some limitations. I would say that they did not quite reach universal designs. The accommodations did feel very intentional and a bit segregated rather than seamlessly integrated into the facility. And there weren't any family restrooms, which I know sometimes there's issue with like young children coming with their mothers into the women's room to change. So family restrooms can be a great asset to have. And then when it comes to accessibility and inclusion, Watermark and Mill Park Leisure truly had some innovative features that are not as common in the United States. Many of the pools had ramps leading into the water as well as rails and chairlifts. They also provided water wheelchairs and activities designed specifically with individuals with disabilities in mind, one of which was immersion therapy, which I had never heard of and was really cool to get to see. They also have accessible parking spots available in the lots, as well as a lift to all levels of the facility. They also had multiple changing rooms that were made accessible with harness systems, changing tables, railings, adjustable shower heads, and adjustable room dividers. So they really went above and beyond for privacy. One accessibility issue does pertain to the entrance of the facility. It's just a small thing, but to enter quickly, members can scan a card and go through a gate. However, the gates in this area are not large enough to accommodate individuals in a wheelchair. And as a result, these individuals must wait for a staff member to let them in through the side, which delays entry and is a little bit less efficient. But overall, I will say that Australia does a really good job of being highly inclusive.
Or at least in the two examples that you've looked at. So we got to recognize that you're all dealing with a very small sample of selections, but just the same, it does provide some good insights. I'm very conscious of time, and I just want to get to uh, understand maybe just one feature that struck you about the differences between the American and the Australian venues. Let's stick with you, Destiny, and just say if there was one thing that you would say, oh, this really surprised me, or maybe that was exactly what you expected. You're still on mute.
So sorry. One thing that really surprised me was public transportation in Melbourne. I mean, it's great and it's not something we see as often in the United States because attending a facility really goes beyond the facility itself and getting to it in the first place. And the tram, bus, and train systems are really amazing. Um, yeah. So, ooh, ooh.
Okay. All right. And I guess, if you were in the outer suburbs of Melbourne, they might have very different impressions where they maybe only have one bus every hour. But I know from where you're staying and where you've been going, yes, our public transport system does work reasonably well. Ethan, let's talk to you. Just what were some of the things, and I know you've looked at a lot of other places, so maybe it's beyond the martial arts setting, but maybe within that, what is one thing that really struck you about what you've seen and experienced?
Biggest thing that stood out to me in Australia versus America is how various martial arts schools are run. The one that I've been training at in the States, it's a very traditional school with, set time for bowing in, proper etiquette, and all this good stuff. Whereas in Melbourne, it seems to be a lot more you come in, you train for an hour, you go home, and that's kind of it. There's not nearly as much structure to the classes. There's a dedicated time slot for, again, advanced adults, advanced juniors, beginner adults, beginner juniors show up from 4 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 8. But in that hour time slot, you don't there's no structure there beyond the schoolmaster might come say hi and show you something new, but there's not much form to it, I guess.
Okay, so certainly not as formal. Okay, and how about you, Sophia, in terms of the exercise, fitness, gyms, and those sorts of things, what struck you about any of the differences?
So I looked at the landscape and I guess originally I never gave much thought about it because we have a lot of heat islands in Texas, very little planter and parking lots or greenery really. And the facility I looked at, they did not give any consideration to plants, and it was a functional parking lot. It worked, but it was just the bare minimum. And when we came here, looking at Watermark and Mill Park Leisure, it was really neat to see how they took care and how they presented the outside of their building as well as the inside. It was very welcoming and comfortable and nice to look at too. And it felt like a place you'd want to be. Um, and it made it seem like this is a place I'd like to spend my money and use as a place I go and work out.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks for that. Let's open it up to see if any of our guests have any questions or comments. Joanne, I think you may have been monitoring the chat. Is there anything there? Or I think we've got few enough people. If you want to raise your hand and someone in the participants want to ask a question, then we can put your mic on and listen to you.
Yeah, I see a lot of people have introduced themselves, which we really appreciate, but I don't see any specific questions. But yes, if you have questions, please raise your hand. We would love to hear from you. Hazel?
Oh, hello. Yeah, very interesting looking at accessibility in facilities. Since you've been in Melbourne or Australia generally, have you sort of looked at accessibility and inclusion on beaches and the facilities associated with surf lifesaving or anything of that? Because that's very Australian. So you couldn't really, you don't have surf lifesaving, but you do have beaches. So what have you had any observations around those precincts, beach precincts? Thank you.
So guys, I know that you went down to Brighton Beach, and I know that you were on St. Kilda Beach, and we would have seen, we were there on different days, but you would have seen the surf saving facilities, right? That are like the lifeguards there. Did you see, and it might be the wrong time of the year, but did you see any water or surf wheelchairs or any mats or hard surfaces to get out to the water for people? Because that's something that Australia is really known for.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
Sophia and I actually were not able to visit Brighton Beach and St. Kilda, but I do think we visited some other ones. And they were all just, like sand entries, like paths through the trees. So we weren't able to see any accessibility features that larger beaches might have. But I do think Ethan was able to visit St. Kilda, so he might have some insights on that.
I was able to visit St. Kilda, and there wasn't any accessibility to the beach itself in the first place. The only way down to the coast was a set of stairs out of it, staircase here, here, there, etc. But there was no ramp to get to the sand in the first place. Even on the sand, there wasn't any hard surfaces that you could roll a wheelchair along. It was just sand.
okay. And that may be a function, as you know, Hazel, we're in the depths of winter, and it's been a real Melbourne winter with plenty of cold days. So they may not have any of those sorts of accessibility options available at this time of year. But yeah, good point. And as Joanne said, it is something that we do try and do. And there's been a lot of efforts in that area in particular in recent
Yeah.
times.
Bayside
I'd be
Council
interested.
actually does a good job. When I was here in 2019 with students, we met with Bayside City Council and they took us down to the beach and we saw their access. And it was really quite good. It was something at that time you had to reserve the beach chairs in advance. But they did tend to roll out the accessible matting on a regular basis. But we didn't go to that. We didn't really examine any specific beaches this go around.
Yep.
Okay. And what about in Texas then, the beaches there? How accessible are those?
Well, Destiny lives on a beach.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I do. I grew up in the Corpus Christi area, so on a little island called North Padre Island, and we actually have one of the few beaches that you can drive on in the United States. So we have the seawall itself, and when you go down the seawall, there is a paved parking lot on top, and then ramps gradually leading down into the sand, as well as you can take your car on specific areas of the beach if you would like to and access it from there as well, which may be more accessible for a lot of people. We used to have a pier. It did go down in Hurricane Harvey. We no longer do, but that one also had a large, gradual, ramp that you could go up onto, as well as large gates that you could fit a wheelchair through to access the pier itself. But I would say I haven't really seen any rentals or city provided equipment that you can use, such as wheelchairs or pads to lay out. I think if you wanted something like that, you would have to bring it yourself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
JT, it's Neil here. Can I have a follow-up with Ethan?
Sure.
Ethan, you said you went to St Kilda Beach. Right near St Kilda Beach is the new upgraded St Kilda Pier. Did you get out onto that? And what were your impressions on the inclusive additions to that? That's been built by Parks Victoria, and they had a very strong focus on making sure people could get out into the Penguin Rook and out into the marina, etc. You're on mute.
Yeah, he's thinking.
I also forgot that I was on mute. Thank you. For the Penguin Beach, that was pretty accessible. There was a nice boardwalk thing to the actual shoreline where you could watch the penguins come on shore. And then the Penguin Highway, as you guys refer to it, was on that boardwalk as well. You could very easily watch the penguins walking along. But the boardwalk, it eventually came to an area where it turned into a set of bleachers, it seemed like, and
Mhm.
all those bleachers were stair levels.
Yep.
Like you couldn't just roll a chair down down to the lower levels of the bleacher or onto the stand itself. Any wheelchair would be stuck at the top of the bleachers.
Okay.
So there is a comment in here from Matt Firth about the city of Kingston currently installing beach access matting.
Okay. Do you want to share some more about that, Matt? And
Certainly,
I'll
John.
assume
Yeah, happy to
go ahead.
share. Yeah, we're in the midst of running a trial for some access matting that'll actually be permanent. So it won't be about rolling it in or rolling it out. It'll be a permanent fixture, and that'll actually end up across 3 or 4 of our different beaches. And it'll be in areas that has accessible bathrooms and other facilities nearby. I will note also St Kilda does put matting out, I believe it's during summer, beach access matting in some areas near one of their lifesaving clubs, and at Elwood, in front of the sailing club at Elwood, they also have a beach matting that is certainly out in the summer months. So it's something that's growing in Victoria, that sort of facility. And I know that there's a few municipalities watching our trial to see where we end up with the city of Kingston. But I believe that will resolve a lot of issues. Mornington Peninsula also has 2 or 3 beaches that with including Mornington itself that has accessible matting that's actually out all year round. And that they're using the Moby matting style, which is actually a US constructed product. But yeah, whereas we're going for a harder, more structured surface.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, Hazel just shared an article about disability inclusion in beach precincts. So if anybody's interested, look in the chat and you can download that article. The other thing, I did have a question actually for Ethan, because we've talked about his martial arts things many times. And one of the things we talked early on is that his martial arts facility in the United States was very specifically one type of martial arts. Whereas, Ethan, do I recall correctly that martial arts gyms here tend to include many different forms of martial arts? Or was that just the first couple you looked at?
I think yes and no. There's a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu places specifically, and a lot of karate places specifically. And those are the only 2 sort of, I guess, focused disciplines for schools. But there is a lot of mixed martial arts places around here that I did not check out. And I'm not sure what those would teach per se. Maybe it would be more Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and karate. Maybe it would be Taekwondo, for example. I didn't check those out, so I can't say.
Okay.
Okay, well, listen, let's bring things to a close here. And thanks again to your questions and your comments. And it's always great to get a bit of information sharing, and that's good. I'd like to finish off by asking Destiny, Ethan, and Sophia if there was one thing that you picked up that you think Australians should hear from your American experience, and one thing that you would share with Americans from your Australian experience. And let's start off with Destiny, please.
Yeah. Let's see. Australia was really innovative in a lot of things. I saw a lot of stuff here that I had not had the opportunity to see back in the United States. And maybe it's because the facilities that I visited were more governmentally funded and run. But I do think that we can take some stuff away, especially the accessibility features, and be a little bit more innovative in how we're building and designing our facilities and really planning for a wide array of activities and people. And then I'm kind of struggling with the United States, what would retell Australia? Um, I don't know. I think maybe they can be a little bit more fun. I feel like in the United States, sporting is a big spectacle, and people come for the cheerleaders and for the halftime shows. I'd like to see a little bit of that, more of that in Australia. And I know a lot of it is like the cricket is rooted in a very older generational that likes quiet games. But I think our footy games can be a bit louder. We can, I don't know. Let's just see how we can make the games a little bit more exciting, really get everyone involved. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Okay, thank you. Sophia, what would be your suggestions for the two settings?
Well, something I feel like I've taken away from Austria that I'd share back in the US is like more of the universal design that I've seen. A lot of the buildings that I've gone into just seem to like make their buildings accessible, inclusive to a lot of people, and I haven't seen a lot of issues, well, compared to the US, how they do it, that would make it hard for people to feel included. And as for the something I could take home for the US, to give to Australia, I don't know. I think I would agree with Destiny on this because we went to a footy game on our first week here, and we were just very surprised how quiet it was at first. Like the only time you're cheering is once the goal's there, but like there was no in between, and so it was just like we'd sit there and so we'd be chatting, and I feel like it could be a little livened up more.
Okay, thank you. Ethan,
For my American colleagues, I'd say the biggest thing that I can take away from my Australian experience is just open more businesses, more things to do. Because at least in Texas, in my area of Texas, there was maybe three businesses that were, go do the thing at there was like one bowling alley in a 50-mile radius. There was one martial arts school in a 100-mile radius. There wasn't a lot of different options for the same activity. Um, and for Australian colleagues, at least in the martial art context, I'd say just get back to the traditional, get back to your roots, right? Incorporate time for bowing in, time for structuring your classes and whatnot. A lot of what I've learned from my own experience with martial arts is personal discipline and etiquette and all of the more esoteric things that come with martial arts. And I see a lot of, when I see more casual schools, it's loads of fun, don't get me wrong, but then you see someone, over in the corner, he's technically practicing, but he's goofing off, which he's really doing.
fair enough. Okay. And just lastly, Joanne, let me ask you very quickly. You've been running your courses and you've done this a number of iterations. Can you just comment on the advantage or disadvantage of running a study abroad program for something like a cross-cultural analysis type subject?
I think one of the things I really appreciate about coming to teach a subject like this, or any subject really, is the ability to tap into local resources. Not that we don't have that in Texas, because we have lots of really great alumni who are more than willing to come and share their expertise and their understanding. But I think in terms of Australians are, very easy to get in contact with. I think my colleague Hilary Garnier might have struggled just a little bit more because she doesn't have as many connections as me, but we worked on that this time. So I think just utilizing the network of people that I've met over the years and using them in a different way than what I would normally do in a classroom in Texas. Because I think in Texas it's like, oh, I know people next door, I know people here, and let's just go use and this causes me to be more inventive, if you will, and use my broader network in a different way than I normally would. So I appreciate that challenge. And I think my students like how we managed to do that. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. Um, I'll just share two things now. I have to go back to my presentation. So there are, and this will be more accessible once you get the video that you can look at it, but our Ethan, Destiny, and Sophia have also shared some links for what they've investigated, and you can check out those. I want to thank everyone for joining the webinar today, and in particular, I want to thank Destiny, Ethan, and Sophia, because you guys have been great. I know, it's quite intimidating to actually open up your learning experiences with the rest of the world, and you've done a fantastic job, so that's great. I also want to thank Maria, who's not in the room, but and this is the real one, not the pseudonym one, but she was very helpful in terms of getting our Zoom set up and all of those sorts of things. Thanks again to Joanne for running the study abroad program. I think it's a great initiative. And for any other universities that are thinking about coming to Melbourne and want to do things, I'm based here and I'm very willing to help and facilitate. So reach out to me if I can be helpful in any way. I think it's great that once again, our guests have demonstrated how leisure colleagues are willing to contribute your expertise to help meet the World Leisure mission of sharing leisure's capacity as a central force to enhance the human condition. So thank you for that. And if you have any other questions, then you can contact us. Thanks, everybody. The YouTube video will be available. We'll send you the link once it's available. And we'll also have it available on the Leisure Management Special Interest Group website. Thanks, everybody. And for those of you that are starting your day in Melbourne or in Australia, have a good one. And many of the others, good night. And hope everything's going well wherever you may be. So thanks for joining us.